Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Untitled Destiny Podcast, a podcast about Destiny that is still 2 weeks later untitled because I have no idea what else to call it. Well, I have an idea, but I'm sort of thinking about other ideas still. But this is what it's called for now, so that's what we're going with, and that's what I'm going to stick with. So yeah, this is obviously, a podcast for anyone who's sort of, I guess new, or this is your first time listening. This podcast I started a couple of weeks ago to kind of start talking about Destiny more consistently and to kind of pick up on more recent news, kind of keep my thoughts kind of going. But I thought, well, weekly, I kind of don't want to, like, a lot of my stuff, I don't want to be constantly Destiny all the time, but I also follow the game quite a bit. And so I kind of was like, what if I had like it every 2 weeks? And then, of course, I've got another podcast called What I'm Playing, which is a lot more games focused. And then obviously that's like on every other week kind of thing. And so they alternate, each week. And, in between all that, I can then have whatever else I want, whether it's a Destiny review, whether it's, a normal review or an article or, whatever I want to do kind of thing alongside, like, freelance work and everything like that. And so, there's actually been quite a bit that's happened in the last 2 weeks for Destiny. Or not, like, it's not super busy, like, I'm sure in a month's time, with the showcase and everything, things will be a lot busier, but we've got quite a few things to get through. And so, of course, if you didn't check it out, the first episode we spoke about, I sort of introduced the podcast, I sort of shared my thoughts on this season so far, the sort of story, since that story's kind of wrapped up. We spoke about, I think there was also, what was the, I can't remember, I think I sort of spoke about generally where the stories are. I spoke about the Veil Containment things, and we got a bit more of that to get into today. And then I did an extra, what I dubbed extra episode, where I basically took a segment of that episode and then kind of connected it with another 20 or so minutes of extra thoughts based on some interviews that came out. And so there, check out. You can check. I've got a playlist as well, like a podcast playlist. You can check out with more episodes, with those 2 episodes in, and obviously this episode will also be in that playlist. And so today, kind of some things we're carrying on from last week, 2 weeks ago. But we've also got quite a lot more to get into, and so my intent is I'm first going to talk about the recent lawsuit win for Bungie. I'm going to go through a few PSAs about the game, like what's going on in the game, and other things that are going on for Bungie and Destiny in general. Discuss kind of what's going on in the live game, get into more of like the bigger kind of news topics that have been going on, such as the post final shape. We've learned we've had a bit of a tease for what might be coming after final shape. So that'll be sort of what I'll be talking about, or that'll be a fair amount of what I'm talking about there, as well as some extra sort of patch notes. We got a Sandbox, or a mid-season patch with some Sandbox information and updates coming today. Time recording July 18th. They should go up on the same day. Bit of a rush actually getting all this done, because I said before, my original plan was like going and like planning it all ahead of time and then writing it, recording it, uploading it, and everything on like the Monday and all in one day. And when I spent 6 hours writing this podcast yesterday, I was like, man, I'm not gonna have to. This is gonna run me all through the day, and so gonna have to do a bit of restructuring that for sure. But that's where it's a day late sort of thing, but still kind of figuring out this kind of structure. But I guess my whole sort of thought process was like, I aim for the Monday, but if it's at the absolute worst, if it's the Tuesday, then that's not too bad. But that shouldn't be the norm kind of thing. Monday is the kind of day I want to hit. Of course, things might all move around, so we'll see. But yeah, there's also some other few topics I want to get into later on at the end of the show. But first, yes, let's talk about the very first thing I want to talk about is Bungie's lawsuit that they've just won in court. Now, as a heads up, I would recommend. I'm reading a Eurogamer, or I'm reading from a Eurogamer article partly, and some tweets by Catherine Tewson, and I think she works on like the legal team for Bungie, or this, or she's obviously very, she's been fighting this case for them. And so yeah, go to those places, the Eurogamer article and those tweets, which I'll obviously link in the description, to kind of get the exact, what happened and the full context and full explanation, because they obviously will do it justice, and it's a very serious thing, but there's obviously a positive outcome, as Bungie sort of discussed. So, for a bit of context, a while back, there was a particular player who somehow got the phone number of a particular developer or someone who works at Bungie, and they were basically leaving voicemails and threatening them, harassing them, sending voicemails, with like racist abuse to both him and his wife, which is seriously screwed up. And then what's even more screwed up is, I guess, to prove that they knew their address, they ordered a pizza to their house with a message for the delivery driver to knock loudly on the door, quote, at least 5 times, unquote, or end quote, sorry. And it's insane, and obviously because of that, I mean, I can't even fathom why someone would do that. I can't even fathom how someone could feel in that position, like on either end. It's awful. It's all awful, really. And so from reading this, obviously that employee, took time off work from Bungie while they pursued action, including outside counsel. And obviously that's been going on in the background for a while, and then just recently, after various investigations, Bungie's obviously found who did it, and following the court hearing, they've sued them for approximately $500,000. But as a knock-on effect from them winning this lawsuit, it's actually meant that the court is now allowing employers to pursue action to protect their employees in future, and that they're able to pursue that protection and then be able to recover the costs in court, once it all goes through. And of course, there's a few other knock-on effects as well, but I will just point to Catherine's tweets for the full rundown of that, because, as I said, it's a very deep thing. There's a lot of it's obviously because it's to do with law and legal things. There's a lot of, a lot of confusing, I guess, jargon and sentences, but generally this is the sort of summary of it. But I certainly recommend getting the full context straight from, I said the Eurogamer article, but also Catherine Chuson's tweets, because that's the source, right? And I think that'll do it justice. You certainly need to, if this is something you want to learn more about and sort of know what happened, and it's important. What Bungie have done, again, I take my hat off to them, because they are proving it. But as Bungie have done many times, they're just always standing up for their employees, and not only that, but they also take it a step. Well, I'll say a step further. They take it a step further by this court action, but on the they also handle things like they've been going after. They've won several lawsuits now against cheat software developers as well. They're obviously creating software you can download and use in Destiny and to hack and everything. And it's just honestly really cool to not only see Bungie standing up for the game in that sense, but also going as far as really sort of finding, going straight to the source, and sorting these things out and really protecting their employees. I mean, you don't see it very often, really, at all. And I hope that this keeps happening, where because there's honestly, it's honestly crazy to me that people are the way that they are, and you can dislike the game, have your criticisms, whatever, but to go after and harass an employee over it, and especially to this degree, is just absolutely sickening. And I can't even believe that it's happened. But yeah, as I said, definitely check out the Eurogamer article and the tweets from Catherine Tucson, because they give you the full context and explanation to this whole situation. And I don't particularly want to butcher anything. I don't want to, I don't feel like I know if I've done it justice, sorry, because it is very serious. And short or long is that Bungie, it's good that they've obviously stepped up to this degree, and congrats to them for winning it. It's very good. And so yeah, check that out for sure. Moving on from that, I don't want to kind of move on and be sort of tone deaf, but the next thing we've got here is talking about Bungie Day. There's a couple of last sort of things to sort of mention from this. We've got they teased on Twitter on, I think it was Bungie Day, 7th of July. They teased the upcoming Destiny 2 showcase, and they didn't really show much, honestly. They just, again, it's reiterated that it's on August 22nd. But they posted to Twitter an image that showed kind of the Traveler with obviously the Witnesses portal that they created on the front of it. And there's a lot of iconography and patterns in the background, and they kind of differ on each side. On one side on the right, it looks like it has those kind of traditional Destiny sort of spirals you'll see in a lot of Destiny art. Like when you load the game, you'll see it typically. I'm pretty sure the loading screen is like that sort of spiral. It's kind of like all the lines, in the circle. And then the left side, there's a sort of strange iconography kind of pattern that looks kind of Vex-like to me, but it could as easily be darkness related, or it could just be just random whatever. And there's also kind of on one side you got a bluish light, and on the left you got an orangey kind of color, with I think there's some sort of darkness swirls in the lower right, so I'm pretty certain it is sort of more darkness than anything. And I assume it's just kind of generally sort of showcasing the light versus dark, but I do wonder if that is like a Vex kind of design. That it makes me wonder if it's a hint, because we'll get into it a bit more later, but there seems like post final shape will involve the Vex in some way, based on some hints we've been given. We'll get into all that in a bit. But the tweet also, it reads, quote unquote, "Discover what lies beyond." And a press release that released on that same day echoed again from a previous press release that we'll learn about the future. And it says, quote, "For those eagerly anticipating more information on the final shape and the future of Destiny 2, the Destiny 2 showcase will take place on August 22nd, end quote." And of course, there's not really much to go on, but of course they reiterate again the future of Destiny 2 separate from the final shape. So that doesn't seem to be just a generalized thing. Hopefully that is going to be, we're going to be learning about what's coming beyond final shape, and hopefully their show will inspire confidence in a lot of us, and a lot of the player base, really. And I am very curious. I'm always excited for these showcases, honestly, because I like Destiny a lot, and it's always cool to see what Bungie are working on. I just hope they surprise. That's ultimately what it is, and not surprise in like a small way, but surprise in like a big way. Like, show us some stuff and tell us some stuff that we're not really expecting. And I hope that whatever it is, that a lot of the critiques and discussions that have been going on in the community recently do get addressed, particularly on the PvP side. And I'm not sure if they'll actually talk about it here. I think they sort of hinted at in a Vidoc for Lightfall before it came out. They sort of mentioned that they're heading towards the 10-year anniversary for Destiny 1, and so a bit of a far out prediction, but I want to say, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a Destiny 1 10th anniversary release or event of some kind next year too, which I think will be pretty cool, honestly. I'm hoping for that, but of course I'm hoping for that on top of all of the other things that we want, all of the other PvP and MTX discussions and all stuff like that. Hopefully it'll all be discussed. And so, if you want to see that tweet, obviously, any source, as per usual, any source, I will link in the description for you to check out as well. Yeah, so as a few quick PSAs, I just want to sort of talk on a few other Bungie, last-minute Bungie Day sort of news, as well as some of the known issues in the game right now here. So there's a couple more days left on the Bungie Day Giving Festival prize week. To enter this, you have to donate a minimum of $1 during the 24 hours of any given day. So, for example, that's like 10 a.m. PT of one day and 9:59 a.m. PT the next day. So if we're taking today, for example, July 18th reward at 10 a.m. PT today, which is 6 p.m. my time, UK time, you have until 9:59 a.m. PT of tomorrow, July 19th, to be able to enter. So you basically have about, 23 hours and 59 minutes, if you will, to enter that. There's a couple of days worth of potential items to sort of win. There's for July 17th, which you've got until obviously 9:59 PT AM PT today on the 18th for July 17th, you can get a statue of Varix, which obviously, as I said, it ends at reset time in Destiny today. July 18th. You can win a Savathun statue, and July 19th has a PlayStation game code bundle, which I think, if I remember rightly, it contains like Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us Part 1 and 2, God of War, I think, or Horizon. I don't know. There's a bunch of games. I think I covered it last week. But there's I think it's like 5 or 6 games. And then if you enter for every day you have entered that, because it's been going on for seven days for a week. If you've entered that every day, every time you've entered, you gain a entry into a grand prize that'll basically contain a bunch of things, including a signed Lightfall's Collector's Edition, a signed Final Shape Collector's Edition, a copy of the Final Shape Deluxe Edition, and a PlayStation game code bundle. So a bunch of stuff you can win if you entered every single day. So a maximum of 7 votes, of course, if you've entered every day. Next, they also ran. This actually happened. They announced it the week that sort of the TWAB or the TWID of the day after, or the Thursday of the week from that when they recorded that first episode, and then they announced the winner last Thursday. So there's no time to vote on this anymore, but they had a community vote for a community designed or community artist designed ornament for this time for the Witherhoard exotic grenade launcher. There were 3 designs to choose from. The first one was a Titan-esque, like, arcology kind of design. Looks quite cool. The second, I can't really exactly put my finger on what it look like, but to me it was almost like an Oriental style, sort of spacey sort of design. It had like a mix of both. And then the third almost looked like Izanagi's Burden, and it was sort of adorned with some of the Black Armory iconography. And the winner ended up being that arcology design, which doesn't surprise me because it was the flashiest and blue. It was very blue and looked to be glowy. So I'm not disappointed by that, but I did quite like the sort of orientally sort of design of the second two, or the second one you could vote for as well. Bungie also revealed the winners of the fishing tournament that was being held. I thought this was actually a bit of a weird idea because I was sort of thinking fishing is all RNG, so I'm not quite sure how it was all conducted. I actually didn't realize. I didn't even know where they were conducting. Honestly, I didn't look too much into it. Seemed like a bit of fun though, for sure. But yeah, if you're into that, they announced the winners for that in the recent TWID or TWAB. Well, you're gonna still call it TWAB. I just feel like I'm gonna keep calling it TWAB, but then I keep calling it so I'm gonna call it TWID because that's what it's called. But then I'm gonna immediately be like, the TWAB, because everyone knows it's the TWAB. But yes, the TWID TWAB was the one that was dated the 13th of July. Has all of the info for that, for the fishing tournament winners. And just as a couple of asked PSAs here, these are the latest known issues that Bungie has acknowledged. One is due to an issue, Bungie have temporarily disabled the utility Kickstart armor mod. The Child of the Old Gods aspect is not providing ability, energy, or health as expected. Defeating unstoppable champions too quickly during the intro to the Psyops Battleground Moon Nightfall can result in missing revive tokens, as well as players earning a lower than expected reward tier. Altar of Reflection's memories may not appear centered when viewed, and some players are unable to acquire new Trials of Osiris rewards. And then kind of another issue that happened just this more overnight. I woke up and I sort of saw it. Obviously, we've got Solstice arriving today at July 18th at Reset, along with the mid-season update. But for some reason, a lot of the Eververse items and the Week 9 seasonal challenges just arrived early. And just out of nowhere, people were able to buy them and look at them and preview them and everything like that. And so basically Bungie Help has fixed this since, but these are their tweets. Their first tweet reads, quote, "We're aware that Week 9 seasonal challenges and some Eververse items that are missing art have been updated early. We are investigating the impact of these areas and possibly other areas going live early. More information will be provided when available," end quote. And then later, their updated, their second tweet reads, quote, "Update. We have issued a hotfix to resolve Week 9 seasonal challenges and Eververse items unlocking earlier than intended. Players who purchased Eververse items will still be able to use them, and seasonal challenges that were unlocked but not claimed can be claimed tomorrow," end quote. Of course, they say that'll be tomorrow, but that's obviously today now, July 18th, basically. It's funny because obviously this brought up a lot of the discussion where people were like, "Oh wow, look, Bungie moves so fast when it's Eververse, but not any an actual game dev issue," which I find funny. Well, there was both that, but then there was also the crowd that was saying, "Wow, Bungie they're that into microtransactions, they're releasing them early," kind of thing. And yeah, so in terms of that first, the people saying Bungie always move fast when it's an Eververse issue. I don't quite know why. Well, I say it's not so much Eververse. It's also whenever things are rewarding. I think whenever it's like a rewarding thing or an overrewarding thing, people they move fast. But it's like, I don't know, game dev just doesn't work the way that people think sometimes. I think some things are easy to fix than others. Some things are more higher priority, and ultimately you don't really want your whole reward system being broken. So probably why those things get fixed quicker or worked on, or not so much worked on quicker, but just they're easier to fix. It depends what it's to do with. It's I imagine something like Eververse especially is probably built in a way where they can. It's a live store they can update whenever they want, kind of thing. And it's just like the way that they can disable certain items, which I'm pretty sure they didn't used to have that functionality where they could disable individual items. When something's like broken and tearing up PvP, and not only that, they can also disable certain items in certain activities as well. So they obviously have extra, ways that they can, I guess when something's problematic, they can disable it in time. And so yeah, I think some of the reactions are, as per usual, they're funny, but a little bit ridiculous sometimes. But yeah, it's any excuse for outrage sometimes. But yes, let's get into what's been going on in the live game now. So we've kind of gone through some of those, sort of smaller news bits. Let's get on to, what was going on. And funny enough, this happened straight after I recorded, the day after. The exotic quest finally that I think I even spoke about in that episode. The exotic quest for the Wicked Implement exotic scout rifle arrived during the fishing, the lucky week for fishing, where you could have a higher drop rate for the exotic fish. That launched inside of deep dives. And so you needed all 3 exotic fish, or I say all 3, there's actually 4 apparently, but there's 1 from each location, 1 on Nessus, 1 in the EDZ, and 1 in Savathun's Throne World. But apparently you only need 1 player in the group to have all 3, apparently. I don't actually know that for certain, but that's what people are saying. But of course, that mission launch, it was actually quite a cool mission. I think I mentioned last week, because someone in the chat, in a Twitch chat, had said that there was some darkness pyramid ship looking stairs, and I remember seeing those in the mission. And then when I saw that comment, someone was like, "Oh, maybe it was through the exotic mission," and they were bang on. That's exactly what it was. I don't know if they knew if that was a thing that was known, but that's exactly what it was for. That was you could basically go off the beaten path of the main deep dive of a deep dive itself, and it would lead to this other area, this pyramid ship, and it's in here that's where you pursue the exotic quest. And that's very much like it was kind of like the Whisper mission, but it reminds me of, in Destiny 1 there was a Taken King mission, which was the original Whisper mission. I'm pretty certain, yeah. And a Black Spindle, I think it was called back then. And you play the mission as normal. It was a daily. It was the heroic mission for the day. And suddenly, if you got through it quick enough, a certain door was open, and then going through that door led to this alternate kind of ending to the mission, where it kicked in a timed mission. And this is exactly like that. It's a separate thing. It gives you a timer, and if you beat it, you get the Wicked Implement Scout Rifle. And if you don't, then you, I think, have to restart the deep dive and go through it again. It was actually, I think I got lucky, because I did it first time with matchmaking, without communication or anything like that. And a lot of people are actually saying that this is like super difficult and everything like that. And I was sort of surprised, because I could see what people meant, but I was actually like, well, with no communication, and I felt that we were kind of doing it first time, and it wasn't particularly straightforward necessarily. It was kind of like, trying to figure out as we go. I think we finished with admittedly we did finish for like, I think 15-20 seconds, so it was cutting it very close to the line. Still kind of got through it though. Pretty happy with that though. Saved, messing around. But then it's funny, because when you finish, it gives you a countdown of, I think, like 1500 seconds, and you can go around and shoot these darkness, like, I don't know if they call them obelisks or something, but they're little floating darkness triangle pyramid things you can shoot. And when you get all 7, you get you can go back to a statue, the statue where you get the scout rifle from, and you get some dialogue from Sivu Arath, which is pretty interesting, and interesting little collectible. But I didn't realize that was a thing. What happened was, I just started seeing one of the players that we were with running around and started shooting these different things, and I was like, wait a second. I was like, what are they doing? And I tried following them, and as I followed them, I found each of them. But then they left, and I'd missed where they had gone to one of them, and I couldn't find a guide. So I ran around for like another 5-10 minutes, and then I eventually found it. What was weird was, when I completed, the triumph says, like, oh, you've heard the words of Sivu Arath or something like that. But if you go, you don't actually hear anything when you get the last one. And I was like, I was just like, oh, what if I go back to the statue? And you do, and there you hear the words. It's interesting seeing another one of those darkness statues with like the veil over its sort of head, or like a headdress, not headdress, but whatever you call them. A veil of some kind, a veiled statue, as we've known, suddenly there, and obviously it makes sense inside a pyramid ship, but I'm curious to know who that is, or what that's meant to be, because the last time we saw one of those, I think, was before the Witness was introduced. I'm pretty certain, because it was in Beyond Light. I think I could be wrong. Maybe, Beyond Light, and then they had another one on the in the Deepstone Crypt as well, in the raid. There's one you go past, and at the end of Garden of Salvation as well. So I'm curious to know what this statue is, and why it suddenly reappeared. Or maybe it's Maya Sundaresh. Who knows? That's probably a bit of a far-fetched guess, but who knows? But yes, so that mission was cool. There's also a catalyst, but I don't have yet. You actually have to get the catalyst by getting tier 7 completions of Deep Dive. I think it's a guarantee, seemingly. And I think that did unlock just this last week. I think, even though it was visible that you could see that they had a catalyst, and it said how to get it. Or at least it said obtained through deep dives. But of course, it seemed like it was tier 7. It actually didn't seem like it unlocked till the week after. So probably needed a bit more clarification on that, to be fair. But yeah, so what was I going to say? What's something I was going to say actually on that point about the oh yeah, of course, deep dives themselves are now being messed up because you've got some people that are just playing it for the probably the challenge, the pinnacle, or just wanting to play it for fun. You've got other people going in for tier 7 runs now, and then other people just want the exotic, and so now the mission has got people pulling it in like 3 different directions, and so I don't know if Bungie will be able to make any changes to that, but feels like a bit of an unfortunate situation. Hopefully something can be done. If not, I guess you just have to rely on matchmaking if you want a specific thing and it's not going too well matchmaking. Like, that's probably what I'm going to have to do for the tier 7 catalyst, honestly. I'm just going to have to go with that, get it that way. As if I get it at all, I might end up just not even getting around to it at this point. But yeah, so in terms of the gun, perk-wise, it's a gun it's a Scarifel, obviously, that slows on precision hits, and it generates stasis shards. And with the catalyst, those stasis shards actually overflow the magazine, so you can have more. I think it's got 15 per mag, and so you can get it higher than that. I think it can go up to 30 at least. I'm not sure it can go higher. But so yeah, as I think Bungie have said in a blog post, that actually if you have a stasis subclass equipped, you can kind of go around not having to reload. I've not actually used it in PvE yet, which is usually where I test out guns first. But I did, with playing a bit of Iron Banner, I was using in PvP, and I thought it was okay. I've not used Scar Rifles in a while, and I believe they did get buffed a while back. But so this might just be the general expected sort of performance for those guns in PvP. But I actually thought it was alright personally. I enjoyed it. It's funny when I don't play PvP in a while. I'm like, oh man, what gun do I use? There's a set of guns I usually go back to, but then I'm like, I don't know if I want to use that. Like I sometimes go back to like I've got I think it's called First In Last Out, which was the one I have is from Season of Arrivals. That I can't remember the perk, so I've gotten it now, but it's a slug shotgun, good for range. And I never used to like slug shotguns, but then when I got used to using them, I even tried out Chaperone as well, and I was like, oh man, these are pretty fun, pretty good actually. But yeah, generally though, the community sentiment on this gun is not particularly high. A lot of people aren't a fan of it. But Bungie have said in the recent Twid Twab, I'm just going to call it Twid Twab. Let's just go with that. They've said that there is a buff coming, and they said, quote, "We heard feedback on the base weapon and have a few buffs on the way. Among other things, we were cautious with the timing window for creeping attrition, but we're looking at adjusting that in the future. Keep an eye out for that," end quote. I don't know when this will be. Maybe it should be for next season. And for anyone, just so you know, creeping attrition is the exotic intrinsic that slows enemies on precision hits. So I think they were saying that they didn't want to make it too quick in terms of how much it procs the slow effect. But yeah, that was the exotic mission. Thought it was good. Cool little surprise. It's just that now deep dives have been totally sort of messed up in a way and totally thrown off, and so I actually haven't ran a deep dive since I've got the exotic weapon, so I've not witnessed that firsthand, but but in terms of what else is going on in the game, we've had Iron Banner. I believe it's the Fortress game mode that's on. It's obviously going to end at reset today. I haven't played much Iron Banner really at all this season. I really wanted the emblem. It was really, really nice emblem design this season. And I wouldn't have minded if I could have gilded my title, but I've just not got around to it. I blame Final Fantasy 16 primarily because of that, but I thought it was okay this time. Typically, my experience in Iron Banner is that I have issues with matchmaking, and it just doesn't seem very consistent. I typically run into, when I win, it's like a really competitive game, but otherwise, it's just usually losses, and it's a pretty frustrating experience, honestly. And I remember when they had the freelance node, it was, I think I had some decent matches, or I would go on, what would happen is I would have like a loss streak. I'd have like a really long loss streak and then a really long win streak, and it would go like 4 or 5 matches, win, loss, and it's just annoying, honestly. I just wish they were more balanced, a bit more kind of fluctuating. Like sometimes, yeah, we'll get mercy ruled, other games will mercy rule M's, other games it'll be a tie game, other times it'll be a decent game, and that experience is just never consistent kind of thing. So, and I assume that's in part because of that thing a lot of people don't like called skill-based matchmaking. So hopefully, at some point that will get looked at, because skill-based matchmaking, I'm sure it has a place, but it sometimes feels like it's leading to these really kind of inconsistent and unfun matches, honestly. or at least a experience of playing matches back to back. Just losing over and over is kind of boring. Even winning over and over is decent because it gets you the rewards quicker. But I actually wish, now I've not played that much, I wish I'd kind of played during that time where Iron Banner matches were just getting cheesed, basically, because people were using that, whatever it was on Titans, that would let you, it would like skyrocket your control score and it would merge all the enemy team. Even though that was annoying and it's cheesing it, and I typically don't like stuff like that, I wish I'd done it now just so I'd got the emblem. But yeah, typically I don't like doing stuff like that. But yeah, I do. The one thing I will say is I like that there's I think I mentioned this last week, but I like that there's a Strand Fusion Rifle. There is also the I can't even talk. Swarm of the Raven was the grenade launcher. It was a reprisal grenade launcher, which I used to use quite a lot, actually. Had a good roll on that back in, like, Season of Opulence. I remember using that on Galran. Pretty good. And then they've brought that back. I don't know what perks it's got on it. I think I'm one rank away from getting that, so I'm going to hopefully play and just get that again so I can have it there for focusing for next season. But I wouldn't mind if I can. I don't know if I'll have time. It might have to wait till next season. But the Fusion Rifle, I wouldn't mind getting with a PvE roll of auto-loading holster and Vorpal Weapon, because I just thought that that's probably the best perk roll there. I'm not too bothered about PvP, but maybe I'll try and get a decent roll there. You can get hatchling on it, but hatchling on the Fusion Rifle just seems like a bit of a waste to me. Maybe it's good, I don't know. But yeah, as I said, hoping to squeeze in a few more hours before reset today, but it's probably unlikely, especially when I want to play Final Fantasy 16, because that's all that's on my mind recently. I'm like 40 or 50 hours into it and still not finished. It's crazy. It's a really good game, though. But yeah, in terms of story, obviously we've wrapped up the Season of the Deep story, but we have got some more Veil Containment lore, which we found out will actually be continuing throughout the rest of the season, but we'll get to that in a bit. But in terms of the actual lore that we've been getting, it's actually been really fascinating, particularly the most recent week. And so, of course, spoilers for the story. I will just say quickly, though, if you don't know what Veil Containment is, essentially, if you own Lightfall, after finishing the campaign, you can go and talk to Nimbus, and they'll give you a quest that is called Parting the Veil, I believe. And it'll just ask you to do some random stuff across Neomuna, and then it will ask you to go and do a mission. You fight a Tormentor at the end, and that'll open up access to a Veil Containment node that's on the Neomuna map. You basically, when you open up the Neomuna map, in the far left, sort of bottom left-ish area where the Veil is located, Veil Containment area is located on the map, you'll notice there's a new mission icon. You select that and you load into it, and it's almost like a patrol zone in the way it's instance. Like, there's no timer, there's nothing forcing you to do anything in there, but you basically go and load into it. You walk forward a bit and you hold square or whatever your button is for interacting with stuff in the game, and you activate a audio message, and every week there's a new one, basically. And so yeah, it's hidden away on the map. There's no prompt at all to tell you to go there every week. The only thing is that Osiris at the end of that quest says, like, oh, like about checking back. But I was worried because when that first happened, I was like, oh man, like, are you gonna tell us to wait until next season for more? Like, I don't even know. You didn't even explain what the Veil is. Like, where's that? I thought that's what we were doing. And so, yeah, thankfully that's not the case though. And what we're actually getting is some really good lore, like, every week. And we're actually now at a point where it appears that, if anyone remembers Lakshmi 2, she was the EXO leader of the Future War Cult who was killed during Season of the Splicer. Spoilers for this now, by the way, I guess. It appears that Maya Sundaresh, who's the wife of Chioma Essie, who's the one who's reading these logs to us, that both of them, I believe, are Ishtar Collective scientists that have gone to Neomuna, escaping from the collapse that was going on Earth, I believe. And it seems like where it's at, Maya Sundaresh is very obsessed with her work, basically. She's obviously very invested in it to a fault, basically. And Chioma's obviously worried about her. And it seems like Maya has basically imprinted her mind into Lakshmi, and then later, we assume, has sent her to Earth. And this is really interesting because it basically means that Maya Sundaresh is Lakshmi, which ties into Osiris basically says it throws into question everything Lakshmi did during her time, while she was in the last city. And it's even thrown into questions like, well, does that mean Maya's alive still? Is she still out there? I don't quite know in what capacity that would be, but Nimbus kind of poses that question, and it's extremely fascinating, honestly. And what's even more interesting is there's actually a band, I believe, called the Veil of Maya or something like that, and someone apparently made a connection to Lakshmi and Maya, I believe, or something like that ages ago. I saw on Twitter that people were like speculating this a while ago, and I had no idea this was a theory. But this is super fascinating, especially for people to be predicting it that far back. And it's a shame because, again, like, this story feels like, man, this would have been so good for Lightfall. This would have been such a cool, even if it was it is post-campaign Lightfall, to be fair. I just wish it was almost delivered a little bit more weaved in and felt like a grander narrative. Because I think if this was the case, if Lightfall was built upon the fact that we don't know what the Veil is and this mystery, this would have been really cool to kind of learn about, you know. And it's interesting because obviously Lakshmi had that vision about the Vex, and we might, we sort of know about the Vex, as I'll get into in just a bit. It seems like the Vex are going to be a focus after the final shape, and that's interesting because, or that's, has ties to what's going on here, because the Vex have a seemingly quite a big part to play in this sort of story that's going on with Maya and what's happened on the Yamuna and things like that. It's very fascinating, honestly. So yeah, obviously we'll find out a little bit more today, which I'm looking forward to. So honestly, it's really cool that we're getting this every week. It's a bit annoying again, it's not in Lightfall, but I'm still looking forward to a bit more. I'm hoping each week seems to have its own mini kind of revelation. Sometimes we have like a week where it's like, it's not really much, but regardless, brilliant voice acting, really interesting story. This feels like the quality that we were kind of getting back during year 4, honestly. And it's great because we know we're getting this every week for the rest of the season, and then we're apparently getting some at the beginning of the next 2 seasons as well. And so yeah, I assume that there'll be a quest and everything for the next 2 seasons that give you the new strand aspect, because we know that's coming, and maybe a new weapon, because there are still a couple of weapons that we've seen in some of the Lightfall artwork, which we haven't yet got in the game, seemingly. Whether or not that's going to happen or not, we'll find out. But yeah, that's it for what's going on in the game. Obviously, there's Solstice later today, but I'll get into my thoughts. I'm planning to do another episode, a short episode later this week to talk about that. But there is some news on what to expect from Solstice, so I will loop back around to that in a bit. For now, though, kind of jumping off of this Veil Containment lore, I do want to look back at those recent Bungie developer roundtable interviews that discuss the Veil Containment and more, because I think there's some really interesting things that we can kind of pull out of there. Both for the future of Destiny, but also with what's going on right now and the development of Lightfall and kind of my predictions before. So let's get into that. So I kind of covered this a little bit before in that Untitled Destiny episode, Untitled Destiny Podcast extra episode that I posted on the week, during the week after I posted that first main episode. I did like a short episode kind of highlighting part of the show, kind of evolved from an idea of just a highlight post to a like, I can do a middle episode, I can do a sort of mini episode, And Bungie had kind of said that Lightfall was always planned to be like a middle piece, but I believe there's more to this, and it's kind of like, we're getting this really well-written lore and dialogue in Veil Containment, and so I'm kind of the belief that during Lightfall's development, the story was never quite set in stone, and, either that, or that they were kind of trying to figure out how they would kind of weave it in the overall expansion into the overarching story, because that's kind of what it feels like they're doing now. It's kind of like they're using Lightfall as a base to kind of weave these elements closer into the origin of Destiny, with Maya Sundarish and the Ishtar Collective, and then where it can go in the future, as well as where we're at right now. So we got like a not great story with Lightfall itself that wasn't particularly well executed, but then it's like it is. If they weave this more into that story, I think it would have been a totally different set. I think it would have been a different people have had a different reaction to it. It kind of, if you emphasize that mystery and kind of focus on it there. But of course, we wouldn't be having the weekly drops now. So I do think there's something here. I don't know why they would opt for being so vague intentionally in the expansion. Yet it's like again, it's like being vague, but yet making that vague thing the most important thing doesn't really make sense. It's like you, especially when you're not emphasizing that it's vague, you are just kind of pretend. It's like everyone knows but you kind of thing. So it feels like something has not gone particularly to plan there. And as I said, kind of what I was saying before, following my previous theory as well, the lore drops we're getting now are kind of bringing everything kind of together that we've had. And so what I feel like is basically that Bungie knew how Lightfall was going to ship. They knew what it was going to turn out like. and they were working ahead knowing that they had to kind of weave this in better, and so that's why we're getting these weekly drops. And they can obviously tie it into the strand aspect and the new weapon, and it kind of keeps it all kind of wrapped up rather than just having a simple basic quest. They kind of tied it into making it more of a story-related quest, which is cool, honestly. I like that. And again, I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of things have lined up to what I've predicted in my analysis so far, so I am fairly confident here that something there is more to all of this, you know. And the one thing that has been proven is, of course, while we don't know where it's going entirely or where it's going to end up, the thing I said before was that Bungie's writing quality hasn't just disappeared. Lightfall is a bump in the road that was not like their absolute best or their full intention in terms of writing. At least I highly doubt it anyway, because everything else has been pretty good, honestly. Particularly the big reveals and the lore every week. That's all been pretty good. And yeah, and on top of that, we have had some other news that has come out, you know, from that recent developer roundtable that's also led to some interesting news regarding what's to come beyond the final shape. And so following a report or a interview piece from Shack News, they covered part of this roundtable that we hadn't yet heard with some pretty intriguing findings. And specifically, they focused on the Vex. And they were asking why the Vex aren't much of a focus anymore. And senior narrative designer Robert Brooks replied saying, quote, "There are a couple of parts to this. One, keep playing. Literally keep playing Veil Containment. There's more Vex stuff to come," end quote. And then the other senior narrative designer, Nico Stevens, sort of echoed that discussion further, talking about the Vex on a larger scale, by saying, quote, "If you are a collection of beings that can time travel and pop in on the timeline at any point, and you see two god behemoths boxing it out in front of you, and your goal is like, I want to be standing when those two are done, you're probably going to take a step back and be like, I'm gonna let them take each other out, and we'll see what happens after that." End quote. He basically says that the Vex are in like a wait and see position as well, and effectively saying that the Vex are obviously seeing this conflict going on, and they're very invested in, like, you know, with time travel and things like that, and so they're kind of letting this all play out because they want to see where it's going. We know the Vex are all about predicting the future, and they want to know, you know, what's to come. And so from that perspective, it is pretty fascinating. And Nico continues later by saying, quote, "We're trying to bring the Vex in a little bit more of a personalized way." I can't even read today. This is terrible. Right, let's start again. Quote, "We're trying to bring the Vex in a little bit more of a personalized way right now, and in a way that connects with the Witness's story via the Soul Divisive." End quote. And that's interesting because he then basically links it to the Spire of the Watcher dungeon that we got recently. He says that there was a big insight into like the Soul Divisive and how they're linked to the Witness. I mean, if there was, but I certainly didn't get that vibe from actually playing the dungeon myself. So I'm not quite sure where that comes from, or what that's about, but it might be in some of the lore. It might be from, I don't particularly know. I know there was a story about them trying to do something, but I thought it was all connected to Rasputin and stuff. But anyway, Robert continues, and he kind of chants back in, pretty much saying that the Vex are his personal favorite alien sort of faction, since they're the most, you know, alien, fascinating, and sort of most unusual. Which I think he's got a good point, actually. And then Nico kind of wraps it all up by saying, quote, "We get a little bit more information about them coming up in the future, and you definitely haven't seen the last of them. I think once Final Shape concludes, the Vex might be in a position to do some more stuff," end quote. I will say, I apologize for my absolute abysmal reading there. I was, even when sort of writing this, and also when reading this interview, I felt that some of the wording was a little bit weird from the quotes. I don't know if that was just mistranslated, you know, if it was written down in a weird way or quoted weirdly. But I was like, hang on, it probably reads or probably sounds a lot better when you're actually, you know, listening to it. But I just felt like reading these, I was like, oh, totally thrown off, and clearly I can't read properly either. So yeah, this was an interesting bit of news that we found out, because it's both interesting and kind of disappointing potentially at the same time, because a lot of us believed, especially I believe when we were told that we would be leaving our solar system after this saga concludes. That was what Joe Blackburn, I'm pretty certain, said a while back in an interview. And not that that means new enemies, but I think most people, including myself, kind of assumed that, you know. but it sounds like we're not going to be getting a new race. It sounds like we're going to be dealing with the Vex still, which is a bit disappointing because it kind of feels like, man, are we just going to stick with these same like enemies and these races for forever? Now, you obviously have to move. Oh, you have to tie things, and you can't just jump out of nowhere and go something totally new. I feel like that's there is that involved, and the Vex do have time travel, and there are many things that the Vex are interesting about. But I will say that I think whatever it is, if it is the Vex, I'm not opposed to it. I don't hate it, but it has to feel new. Whatever's coming has to feel like it's totally new for Destiny. It can't, whether it's new enemies, it's got to be a new location, but it's got to feel super fresh and new. So even if it's the Vex, it has to be back to that. The way I'm really imagining it is that like super kind of mysterious, the way that the Vex are and like the whole Black Garden stuff and their whole place in the story. I feel like that has to be kind of where that has to be the direction that it goes in. It has to be focused on that kind of the mystery, the intrigue, what is going on, and it has to be really leaning into that, not just narratively, but also visually. It has to be kind of like, making you wonder what's out there, and it has to bring back that mystery. And I actually think the mystery aspect is part that Destiny has kind of not had really in a while. And it sort of had that with the pyramid ships and the darkness, but we're kind of getting to the point where we know a bit more about that now. And I don't actually think that was as grand or whatever as maybe everyone expected or hoped. And so hopefully whatever it is with the Vex is going to be surprising and new and, and that's really what I'm hoping for, because I am concerned that, if we end up just getting like another standard expansion after Final Shape, I think most, there are people saying that they're only sticking around till Final Shape, they're seeing that out and then they're heading off. And I feel like Bungie's got to know that. Bungie's got to know that some people are, especially if you're at the end of a saga, they obviously have to start, placing these kind of like stars on a map kind of thing of like, here's where we're going next, here's what's coming up. And I feel like they must know that, hence why they're talking about the future of the game beyond Final Shape at the showcase. But I feel like, anything, if it's just like a standard expansion, if they were to just like, at the showcase be like, yeah, and the expansion after Final Shape is going to be called this, and it's a new saga, and it's, I feel like it needs to be something that speaks, that's almost like a mini reboot, that almost like a relaunch kind of thing. Like it needs to kick off a new era for Destiny kind of thing, and maybe we're not yet at that point. Maybe they want to wait till next gen, but I also don't fully buy that either. The one thing I will say is that I think that they will not release whatever's after Final Shape, other than that Destiny 1 10th anniversary pack, or if that is a thing, going by my predictions. If that's a total prediction, not a leak, just throwing it out there. If that is real, I think that will come to PS4 and Xbox One. But I wouldn't be surprised if they drop last gen support soon for Destiny. I think they'll let Final Shape sort of ride out, but I'd be curious to know how they handle that, because that will give them more leeway, hopefully, with what they can build. I don't know how that works with crossplay. I always envisioned Destiny with like, what if they had like a modular system where you could download what you wanted? That would then help them get around the sort of issue of, that'll let everyone be crossplay, it will let you download what you want, but it will also mean that you won't, I guess if you could only play what you download, then not everyone is going to have access to the same amount of content, which maybe that would be annoying to people, maybe that's not viable, but I do think that would be cool, and then they can also use that to kind of repurpose some of that old content as they bring it back, as, here, you can now download this, and, I really think that would be such a positive step forward for Destiny, is making it modular. I have no idea how that would work on a technical level. It might not be possible at all. I feel like that's what they would say, but at the same time, I'm also like, I'm sure they know this. I'm sure when they vaulted stuff, they weren't being like, this is what we're gonna have to do forever. I feel like they were like doing it reluctantly almost, because like, why would they want to take content out of the game, especially when they're still selling a bunch of it. It's that they don't want to get rid of content that much that they're still selling Forsaken, and Forsaken isn't even Forsaken anymore. It's just the raid and the dungeon and a bunch of exotics, and they're selling it for like £2 or £3 cheaper than it was when it had that story, which is insane. So like, why wouldn't they want to do that? That said, I do hope if they do make things modular, they don't make you pay for everything again. Or if they do, make it really cheap and just make a bundle that's like, here is everything, you know. Uh, or when you bring it back, make it an in-game silver purchase, unless you already own it, obviously. If you have the license on the platform store, then you've got it. But then, I think, yeah, if you went to other platforms, you'd probably have to buy it separately, I guess. That's probably how it would work. I'm sure it would be a very complex thing, but something like that would be a huge overhaul for the game. That's the kind of, when we talk about new, and we talk about being optimistic for the future, that's what we need. But both that, and also kind of by extension things like PvP. Like we need a big PvP update. That's what we need, and that's what we hope. Well, that's what we're hoping for. Hopefully, that's what we're gonna get. So yeah, I am intrigued about the Vex. I'm a little bit disappointed, but if it is just the Vex as we know them, but I'm hopeful that it will be the Vex in a new light, in a new place that we've not seen them before, and it'll be something quite new. And that'll be exciting. I'll say I think that would be a really cool thing to see. And I guess we'll see. But yeah, that's kind of for the sort of the exciting news. Now we're kind of going into news that's kind of imminent. Things that are going to be relevant right today and outdated as soon as this goes live, pretty much because it's all going to be out. But Solstice is coming back today. It's launching today, 18th of July, and we've been given a bit of information on what's coming with it. It sounds like it's very similar to last year. We've seen the 3 new armor sets as well as the Strand rocket launcher with some kind of questionable perks. So as for the event content itself, Bonfire Bash is back as the mode again. It's not the original EAZ format. Bungie said that they've got greater enemy density and high difficulty. They're 2 things they've worked on. And there are 2 new modifiers. One's called Firebound, which is only active in Bonfire Bash. And that says, that gives you, when close to a fire team member, gain increased recovery and super regeneration. That's the first modifier. And then the second is called Flare, which is active in both Bonfire Bash and the Vanguard Ops playlist. And that says, rapidly defeat combatants to unleash waves of paracausal fire around you, dealing damage to nearby combatants, which I think that's an effect they had a while back. They didn't have it last year. I think it was the year before was the last time they had it. They had some kind of like elemental effects that you could get that would rotate each day in the EAZ. Sounds like they're coming back, just under a different name. So yeah, 2 new modifiers, greater enemy density and high difficulty. For the actual activity, which is good because I think it was pretty easy last year. Hopefully it's not too difficult to get all your challenges complete though. I don't want to spend ages trying to grind this event just to get my event challenges complete and armor upgraded. The currencies and upgrade process from last year returns. Basically, to upgrade your armor, or upgrading your armor gives you higher stat tiers that you can reroll to get higher stat higher stat totals and distribution. And you need currencies to upgrade them. So the first is Silver Leaves, which you acquire just by completing anything throughout the game. I assume anything but Bonfire Bash, I'm assuming. So everything but Bonfire Bash gets you Silver Leaves, and then you get something called Silver Ash, which you need to re-roll armor stats, and you get Silver Ash by earning Silver Leaves and then playing Bonfire Bash, which then converts those leaves into Ash. And then, as I said, you then use the Ash to re-roll armor stats. And then the final currency is called Kindling. Kindling, which is a weird word. It's like all one word. Kindling, not kindling. You basically acquire Kindling by completing Solstice event challenges, and you spend that on armor to increase the stat roll potential, essentially upgrading it through each tier. And apparently each armor piece can be upgraded 3 times. And essentially, when you upgrade a armor piece slot, so helmet, gauntlets, chest, boots, or class item, that will be permanent across all future and existing copies of that armor slot. But I believe that it's all for that character, but I think you have to redo it for each character. But when you complete the event challenges, I think, or maybe it is across all, maybe it is account wide. I'm not too sure if it's account wide or not, but I think I'm sure last year it was like you had to acquire the Kindling on each class, but you could still. I'm not sure. Don't take my word for that. We'll find out today. It could just be account wide. But yeah, when you fully upgrade the armor, you'll unlock a glow, as is the same with previous years. I assume that glow is just the standard white glow because you don't get you only get the basic glow if you for playing. And a second glow, which I assume will change based on your currently equipped subclass, you'll be able to purchase from Eververse. Certainly for silver, hopefully for bright dust as well. Hopefully that's going to continue to be a thing. They didn't actually call it out; they just referred to them as free and paid. So hopefully there's no weird changes there. And there's also a new strand rocket launcher with, as I said, some weird perks. Which, going by light.gg, this is in the API right now. In the first column, this rocket launcher has shot swap, pugilist, demolitionist, field prep, autoloading holster, impulse amplifier, and ensemble. And in column 2, you've got cluster bomb, swashbuckler, chain reaction, envious assassin, one for all, hatchling, and adrenaline junkie. I'm thinking personally going for something like autoloading and cluster bomb or chain reaction. Envious assassin is annoying because like it's in the second column, but I think if that was in the first column, this would be a pretty good rocket, because envious assassin, that's getting a buff as well, which is baffling to me. I think it's already pretty good, unless I'm missing something or misunderstanding something. But of course these are subject to change because we don't actually, we haven't got the patch that's going live today with Solstice, so all of that could be different. So who knows, that might be different in the game. But yeah, this is Solstice about what I expected, to be honest. Obviously a lot of people seem pretty, I'll say, disappointed. I think a lot of people kind of expected this as well, but not particularly wowed by it. I'm kind of fine with it, to be honest. Like I would like more innovation with events and less focus on microtransactions, but who knows if that'll happen. There is, of course, a new event card which is paid, which it's weird. Again, a lot of people are still frustrated about this, but personally, I'm like, well, it's cheaper than it would be to buy these items from the store. So I don't really know why people are complaining as such. I agree that, yeah, it's like another avenue of monetization, but it's like, I don't know. It's not too bad. I'd rather it just be free, though. I wouldn't complain about that. Or you buy it with legendary shards or something like that, or you just get it for free. I don't. It's one of those. It's almost like you might as well not charge it. But essentially, events, where we're at now, in terms of events, this is actually giving us more. Like, so they used to give more cosmetics that you could earn during events, basically, and then they kind of started to pull that back a bit, and essentially this is kind of, the event card kind of returns it closer to that, but obviously now you have to pay for it. So so it used to be better, but this is better than the worst version that we were getting, technically, as far as I'm concerned. I will say though that I'll push back a bit because they do include a shader. And already this season they're selling 3 $10 shader bundles, which means if you want all of them, that'll be $40 to get these shaders, which used to be all sold for Bright Dust or earned through the events or the game. And it appears like those $10 shaders aren't being sold on the store for Dust like many others. So yeah, bit of a question one there. Hopefully that doesn't continue to be a trend. I imagine they've sold quite a bit, but I'm hoping that, again, MTX, there is a big focus right now, a lot of players. I'm hoping things get kind of rolled back a little bit as we go into the future. And so next, in more news, we've got Bungie mentioned some patch notes that they missed from the patch that launched with this Season of the Deep. And while there's obviously the mid-season patch, I'll get into that just after this. I just wanted to touch upon a couple of these missed patch notes from Season of the Deep that Bungie have called out. The first of which is some respawning changes, which Bungie basically gives some insight first into how, they give some insight into how spawns are previously weighted before kind of getting into what they're going to be doing or whatever. And so they say, quote, all Crucible respawn points are evaluated on a number of factors: proximity and sightline to enemy players and owned objectives, as well as proximity to friendly players and owned objectives. Previously in Control and many other objective-based modes, it very strongly weighted friendly objectives, good, and enemy sightlines / proximity, bad. End quote. And so in an attempt to get players back into the action, Bungie have basically, what they're doing is they're going to be reducing the importance of those friendly objectives and enemy sightlines, or at least that's what they have done, sorry. They've reduced the importance of friendly objectives and enemy sightlines and increased the importance of friendly players, but they found that they've basically tuned the influence of enemy players down too far, which then leads to a worse spawning system, and you can, easier spawn trapping essentially as a result of that. And so to address this, they've said that in the first hotfix, which we'll be releasing after today's update, so we'll have today's update, and then there'll be another hotfix at some point, and then in that hotfix, they said they are, quote, going to be increasing the influence of enemy player sightlines and proximity back to where it was before, end quote. and they're hoping that the benefits of spawning nearer to the active engagements will stay, but in hopefully a safer overall environment. And of course, they mentioned that they'll follow feedback and analytics to adjust their systems needed. It's funny because I in the bit of PvP I did play, I did actually wonder. I was looking at it being like, these spawns seem a little bit off. Something seems a bit weird here. I don't know if it was when I spawned in. I think I was in one area and I just watched one player spawn, and I started shooting at them. They ran behind cover, and then another player spawned at the exact same location. I'm like, that was the first sign to me. I was like, yeah, something seems like it might not be working quite how they want it to work right now. Yeah, and so the next Miss Patchmo, they talk about competitive division matchmaking, and they basically discuss that previously the game would basically matchmake players based entirely on skill, and it would then throttle the amount of division points won or lost based on how far above or below a player's skill is from their target skill. And but you sort of say that they believe, while skill-based matchmaking may produce the fairest matches, it also takes away from that experience of, climbing a ranked ladder and everything like that. And so that, that is to say that players, shouldn't immediately play against the highest or lowest ranked players after finishing their placement matches, regardless of their skill. And so they then delve into how competitive matchmaking works for Season of the Deep. And they say, let's try not to butcher this reading, quote, in Season 21, competitive 3v3 matchmaking rating, aka MMR, is calculated based on both rank and skill, with the goal being to improve the ladder climbing experience whilst maintaining competitive integrity and match fairness. So, if you're near your target skill, I've already messed up, how dare I? If you are near your target skill, you will match at your rank rather than skill. We limit how far above or below your target skill you match, so if your skill marks you as an Ascendant player, for example, you will never be considered below Adept, no matter what your current rank is. The same goes for if you are above your target skill, you will never be considered more than one major rank above your target skill. End quote. I nearly got through that without butchering it. Anyway, they also basically share a few changes that they're considering for a future season. The first is that they're thinking of adjusting the rank and skill limiting so that it doesn't limit at all if a player's above their target skill. And the second is reducing the amount of division points that are throttled if a player is far above or below their target skill. I assume that's so that a player with a low rank with a high skill can climb easier, so that they're not, throttled back kind of thing, because that'd be frustrating if you're playing at a high skill and not getting many points because the game believes you're, or has your rank lower, essentially. It's actually funny because I have not played competitive a single time, I don't think, since these changes were added. No, wait, till I did. I played 2 matches, I think. But I've just never found comp has fully appealed to me. I will say, though, that I did like this overhaul they did, and especially adding in more unique rewards. I think they've got, much further to go with it, but I like kind of the rank system. I like there's transmount effect that changes based on your current rank. I think is awesome. I would actually love more stuff like that in the game. More stuff to earn across the game that you can kind of show off that's actually changing stuff like that, I think would be a really good thing to have in the game, honestly, moreover. So, thumbs up there. But yeah, so a lot of these comp-specific tuning changes are probably understood a lot more by a greater level by those who actually play it. Obviously, hopefully I didn't butcher not only the reading, but also the explanation and whatever of these changes, because it's a little bit beyond my understanding from where I'm at in terms of what I play. Not beyond my understanding. I understand generally what they're saying, but of course it's not really something that I'm engaging with, so I can't give a proper opinion on it, I can't really give a proper experience, I can't really have that proper understanding of it. It's something I want to play comp at some point, but it just doesn't appeal to me. I like Iron Banner and Trials, I'll play those now and again, but yeah, comp is like a corner of PvP that I've rarely gone to in Destiny 2, really, so... And so the last thing they talk about is their dynamic skill range feature, which is basically designed to find matches quicker during low population times or when there are low population skill brackets. They mentioned that they basically built this feature in Season 19, which is Season of the Seraph, but then they had issues turning on to get good data. Then they found a window earlier this season during Iron Banner, but then they apparently ran into a bunch of issues, so they were just like, no, we'll turn it off. So they turned that off then. And they've basically said, kind of in response to that, they're fixing bugs, and following another round of intense testing, they're hoping to release it in a future season. And so there's not really much to go on there, other than the fact that they, in Iron Banner, they sort of launched that. But they do mention here, they say as a final note to stay tuned because they have some quote-unquote exciting reveals to share before next season. Now, this is the Crucible, I guess I assume the Crucible team or people from the Crucible side speaking. I wondered about this. I don't know if I saw many people talking about it, and it's one of those where you don't want to get excited over nothing. But again, it's that thing of like, don't set expectations high. When you say exciting reveals and you say next season, well, we know we're getting a new map next season. We know that there is a new mode or a new modifier or a mode that they kind of. They said something about making a mode with a rule set that they can use as modifiers that they can add onto modes, kind of thing. They said that they're working on that, and I don't know if that's coming next season as well. So maybe that's what they're kind of focusing on. But I'm really hoping that these are going to be like genuine surprises and not just like the usual like, oh, we got a new gun for you to get, you know. So I'm assuming it is referring to the new sort of Vex network map that was previously teased. It would be nice if they introduced a new armor set for Crucible, because they haven't done ritual armor sets this year, despite the fact that they said that they would continue to release new armor sets for rituals every year, and they have not addressed it as far as I know, which I don't know why. I don't know why they couldn't have made another armor set for 3 different vendors. And I say 3 different vendors, by the way. It's the same armor set across all 3 vendors for each class, but with just different decals that associate with the mode. So it's not even like actually 3 different armor sets, which would be really nice. And I mean, it would be cool if that's what they're going to try and bring in. But yeah, so yeah, I think it could be to do with the new Vex network map that was teased before, and maybe that new mode. But hopefully, it's going to be more beyond this, and hopefully with some bigger focus during their showcase about PvP overall. But there are actually, in terms of Crucible, today's update, this mid-season patch, there are a couple of things coming alongside it. So they've sort of said, alongside Solstice, they've said that pretty much the 2 main points here is that 1, they've fixed a few out-of-bounds spots on various maps, and 2, the Whisper of Chains fragment, I believe it is, they've reduced the damage reduction in PvP from 15% to 5%. And that's it. That's your Crucible update for the mid-season patch notes. But of course, sounds like there'll be more coming next season, not just with the new map, but hopefully some more exciting stuff. Hopefully. I'm hoping. Again, hope for the future, just like Paul McCartney said. So yeah, let's get into the meat of this mid-season patch that's coming today, specifically in regards to the Sandbox aspects. I'm basically going to read the patch notes for the changes verbatim, and I'm going to kind of add in a bit of Bungie's insight and sort of my thoughts as I go. I don't really think I've got many thoughts, because a lot of this is more PvP relevant, and it's kind of just like very much a lot of time I look at PvP and I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes. So for pulse rifles, Bungie feel that pulse rifles are generally in a good place, but they feel that low base aim assist stat value pulses, such as high impact archetypes, are too forgiving. And so they're basically reducing the auto aim angle at 0 aim assist by around 10%. And that will apparently also have a reduced effect as that stat value increases as well. In terms of bows, they've got here, lightweight bows in particular, they said they've received feedback that lightweight bows feel much worse when to use compared to precision bows, and they've been one of the least used and least effective weapon subfamilies in the game for a long time. And so, to make so the changes they're making to bows, specifically lightweight bows, they're increasing the fixed damage fall off start distance from 15 meters to 25 meters. They're increasing the fixed damage fall off end distance from 20 meters to 45 meters, and they're increasing the final accuracy by around 10%. And Bungie also plan to make a few changes additionally to bows in Season 22 overall, both improving how they're affected by reload perks and how well their shots register at longer ranges. Next is a quick thing on Shayura's Wrath, the SMG. They basically had feedback that the dynamic reticule was too cluttered, and so they've just said that they've made improvements to the ADS dynamic reticule for Shayura's Wrath. Next is shotguns, specifically lightweight shotguns. They basically said that lightweight shotguns have fallen behind the effectiveness of both precision and aggressive frame shotguns, mainly due to the outermost pellets being spaced too far out that makes this archetype less effective at range. And so I don't want to clear my throat a lot. And so in this mid-season patch, Bungie have reduced the spread angle of the outer horizontal pellets by 15%. They've also got some changes for some exotic weapons coming. First off, they've got Graviton Lance, the exotic pulse rifle. They believe that this gun is too easy to use in PvP, and they liken it to a primary ammo cloud strike. But on the PvE side, they feel it lags behind the heavy burst mode of the Revision Zero pulse rifle, and so they're basically making changes to its effectiveness in both PvE and PvP. They're increasing the PvE damage by 67%. They've removed the extra aim assist provided by the catalyst, which I think it had the icon of. I think was Hidden Hand, which I think was a perk in Destiny 1, but it's not in Destiny 2, I think. And they've reduced the damage dealt by the Cosmology explosion by 40% against players, but the damage of that is unchanged in PvE. And I believe the PvE damage increase by 67% is not only for the shots, but it's also for the little seeker mines that go out, I think, or like the impact damage or something. There's something to that. Like it's not just the shots from the gun itself. But the next gun here is another pulse rifle, which is No Time to Explain. Bungie basically believes that Graviton Lance surpassed No Time to Explain in effectiveness, and since they're nerfing that, they felt that they had to make a change to No Time as well, so they've reduced its range up by 10. Next is a quick bug fix for the Fighting Lion. That basically prevented it from granting the effect of its catalyst, so yeah, they just fixed an issue where the Chimera perk on the catalyst wasn't applying the buffs to kinetic and power slot weapons. Then they have some changes coming to perks, which is interesting. They've got first they start with a perk called Gut Shot Straight, which basically increases body shot damage when ADSing and decreases target acquisition. They've said for both Gut Shot and Slick Draw, which they make a change to in a minute, they said that they didn't want to give too strong positive effects with no downside, but they felt they leaned too heavily into those downsides, and so they're making some adjustments. So, for Gut Shot Straight, they're reducing the auto-aim penalty by 37.5%, and then for Slick Draw, which significantly increases your handling and gives you decreased target acquisition, they're reducing the auto-aim penalty by 33%. So they're kind of tied in together, those two. And then the other perk, the last perk here getting changed, is Target Lock, which is a perk where your damage increases the longer a weapon is held on the target. And they've basically said that it's become a no-brainer choice in PvP, and so they want to reduce its effectiveness. So they've reduced the maximum damage versus players from 40% to 25%. But again, its damage in PvE is unchanged. Looking further ahead, they've basically said in Season 22 will have a substantial shakeup coming to Zoom, and they've got some more details that are going to come closer to the launch of Season 22 for that. But they've said that, kind of given some overall goals, and they've said that at a high level, they want to both, quote, reduce the variance between the optimal engagement ranges of our mid-range weapons, aka auto rifles, pulse rifles, and hand cannons, and slightly reduce the average engagement range in Crucible by pulling in the maximum damage fall-off distances of many weapon types, end quote. They also give a graph to show, like a table that shows the highest achievable damage fall-off range, kind of comparing it to what it was base, what it was with rangefinder, and what it's going to be maximum after these updates. But I won't read off all those numbers here. You can go and check that out in the Season 21 mid-season update blog developer insights post, which I've linked in the description. Beyond that, though, there's actually some cool stuff coming next season, and even the season after that. So for Season 22, which is next season, which will be going on August 22nd, they've said, quote, hand cannons will be receiving several buffs aimed at improving their usefulness in PvE, including a base reload speed increase and damage increases to minor and major enemies. Sword Guard is getting a substantial rework, tuning to a handful of exotics, including a balance pass for the Monarch and some big buffs to Touch of Malice, and changes to weapon perks, including buffs to Bipod, Envious Assassin, and Under Rover, end quote. Which I'm still surprised about the Envious Assassin one, because I used it a bit, and I thought this perk's really good. I mean, I guess it doesn't improve your reload speed or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure a grenade launcher I have got up to 3 grenades rather than just 1. Which is, you have Ambitious Assassin, which gets you can have a maximum of 2. But to get 3, I was like, a buff? I'm like, what are you going to do? I mean, I'm curious about that, honestly. Sounds pretty good. And then, further out, in Season 23, which I guess will launch in November, December time, Bungie is planning to take another pass at glaives. And they say, quote, for now, we can let you know that we're looking at ways to make them feel better to use without making them annoying to play against, and we're experimenting with things like reducing the delay after firing before you can melee, improving the base projectile speed, and altering how shield energy is granted, end quote. And that'll be cool, because I feel like glaives, I actually quite like glaives, but I do feel like I used them quite a bit when Witch Queen came out, and then over time I've just kind of like dropped off using them. I think it's a really cool weapon type, though. Really cool that it's probably the most experimental weapon type we've had in Destiny, honestly. So yeah, that's it for the news. Next, we've just got a few more things before I wrap up here. basically some kind of miscellaneous topics, including the first thing being a short write-up in not the most recent TWAB, but the Twid TWAB, the one on the 6th of July, where they basically discuss how they balance weapons. And essentially the main thing they're saying here is that the main sort of bulk paragraph, they say, quote, "As mentioned previously, we use a mix of personal experience, playtest feedback, community feedback, sentiment, and uses and effectiveness when we decide how we should handle a weapon that is over or underperforming. The first handful of those are self-explanatory, but we have never really gone in depth as to how we define a weapon's performance in the Crucible. As far as the data goes, we have 5 main things that we look out for that answer specific questions," end quote. And so obviously, as I said, this is a full description. You can kind of read this and look at this. They show off a graph in a minute, which I'll get to in that 6th of July post. And they outline these 5 different sort of aspects they look at when sort of determining how a weapon's performing. And so the first one is usage, which is essentially the percentage of total time the weapon is used during in Crucible. Kills, a percentage of all weapon kills that come from a specific weapon. Win rate, aka how often players with a specific weapon equipped win more than players without that weapon, and kills per minute, basically how many kills a player gets in a minute of game time with this weapon compared to other weapons. And then the primary value that they look at is KOE, aka, or what they call kills over expected, which is basically how many kills are expected from a said weapon. And they basically say the data from the previous aspects, as well as filters for player skill, game mode, subclass, ammo type, data range, controller input method, and weapon slot, are used to determine the overall KOE for a particular weapon. And so since it's a value that's determined by an amalgamation of many other aspects, it's what they follow primarily. And they go on to say, quote, "Low usage weapons can have a highly variable KOEs, but as the usage increases and more of the given population slice utilizes a weapon, we want to see KOE normalize," end quote. And then they basically provide a graph that kind of shows the KOE for primary weapons in high skill PvP lobbies over the last month. I assume June. This was at 6th of July, so it makes sense that they mean June. And they kind of link it to why they're making upcoming changes. For example, that target lock nerf was probably because weapons with that perk available on them were not only having just a high KOE, but also high usage kind of thing. And, in particular, when the Immortal released last season in Trials, and that started just dominating everything, I'm sure that's where it came from. Kind of think that was the thing that kind of gave it away. And I actually brought a further example using the, as to KOE and everything like that, using the Dead Man's Tale nerf from a couple of seasons ago, saying, quote, "In Season 19, Dead Man's Tale was at 60% KOE with a 4.5% usage, leading us to issue a hotfix and bring it more in line with expectations," end quote. So yeah, it's honestly a pretty interesting graph to look at, and you can see certain weapons like Sweet Business have a pretty high KOE percentage but low usage. And so, while it's showing, you've got to think that that's showing data from high skill PvP lobbies, and so it's probable that, while Sweet Business might have a 70% KOE, because it's only at 0.5% usage, those numbers are probably drastically less in general PvP. So I think if this was reaching 70%, and reaching high usage numbers similar to that, like Dead Man's Tale, I'd imagine that then they would look at that and go, yeah, this needs a nerf. But they do note that KOE is not a one-size-fits-all metric, and they say, quote, "Certain weapons, in particular support weapons, or weapons like Le Monarch, must be evaluated separately as their effectiveness is not tied to their ability to kill Guardians directly," end quote. And so yeah, interesting insight, much like that server deep dive they did a couple of weeks ago. It's just really cool to kind of learn about this stuff and kind of be told about it and kind of understand their process and everything like that. And yeah, certainly cool, and it goes hand in hand obviously with that blog post they put out for these updates, and it really it's interesting to think about that. Again, something could seem really oppressive, but yet it's actually only being used a very small amount. So if something is I imagine it's one of those where they look at all these different values. If something's really oppressive but really with really low usage, they might not move that fast for it. But then if it suddenly climbs in usage, like something like the target lock Immortal SMG, then okay, it's not only being used a lot, but it's also oppressive. This needs to change. So yeah, interesting insight, and certainly like these more stuff like this is cool. Honestly, I like when they do this kind of deep dive and behind the scenes look. So yeah, and so moving on, I just want to talk next about an article that I tweeted about about a week ago now, just over a week ago, from a website called PC Games that was titled "Destiny 2 Isn't the Problem, Its Players Are." Okay, so yeah, this article, I saw this, like I said, about last week. I think it was about nine or 10 days ago from today, July 18th. So I think it was probably like the July 8th or 9th. It was a weekend, I think. And I actually tweeted about this when I'd seen it because my general thing was like, we're allowed different opinions, of course. People can have different opinions, but that's not entirely what this is. This is not just a different opinion, but it's almost a misdirection of like what's going on. It doesn't quite paint the full picture. And this has actually just today been well, at least it was uploaded earlier this morning or last night or something, reacted by Aztecross. But I didn't think, and he wasn't, obviously, he didn't really agree with it either, and as I said in my tweet about just over a week ago, I just didn't think it was a particularly fair article, really at all. And obviously, this is nothing against the writer, and I do understand various aspects of the viewpoint here, because in many ways, I agree that there can be a lot of over-the-top outrage, just in general, honestly, just in general on the internet, and the way that people are, and there's a lot of outrage, and then you get the harassment side where people go and attack the person. It's just, it's a mess sometimes, and so I totally get and agree with that, because I think a lot of time with Destiny, there can be a lot of outrage and, extreme reactions. Though I also think that when it's directed at, like, when it shouldn't be directed at developers themselves, like, on their personal accounts, but I do think people critiquing the game doesn't necessarily count. That's not outrage, Some people can take it over the top, people think Destiny's dying, and I don't know if it is. I doubt it is. And it is, and I think even myself we can all forget kind of what the good the Bungie have done, but it's kind of a two-sided coin, because it's all two-sided, double-edged blade, because it's like, on one half, it's like, yeah, I don't want to be criticizing all the time, but at the other side, I'm just like, the reason why I personally and many others criticize and complain about the game is because we all love it. We all want it to be better, and that's what this article does call out. The article does call that out. That we all keep playing and we're all interested because it is fundamentally it's the best shooting, best FPS, best feeling shooter in the entire industry. I think it's got a lot of interesting, like the world is awesome. It's very deep, and it's got a lot of lore in it. But at the same time, it feels like Bungie go from 1 minute they realize Destiny's potential, and then they just drop the ball for a long time, and then they pick it back up again, and it's constantly that, and that has been the history of Destiny, really. And but it's funny, because even when I was writing this podcast, it does make me realize, it reminds me that a lot has actually happened and been discussed in just the last 2 weeks. Obviously, that's in part because we've got the mid-season update, and obviously Solstice, and so the exotic quest and the ending of the story. So there's certainly things that we wouldn't always have that we've got now, that are sort of not always the case. But it is like trying to write this show and actually trying to, like, not only quote it, but also like take write my own words and kind of like put formulate thoughts and have all this all put together. You realize that there's a lot of ranging from small things to fairly big things, and it's got me thinking, like, oh man, how am I going to cover like the showcase and things like that? It's kind of really got me thinking in a different way, because there's obviously a lot to cover, and that can be a lot sometimes just to process itself, but to actually write about that and to kind of to basically put that out elsewhere can be quite quite taxing, quite a lot of stuff. So I certainly agree that there's a lot that we don't probably always remember that Bungie do. And again, when we have a campaign like the Witch Queen, it's really good. But of course, when you get a campaign like the Witch Queen, people are going to expect and hope for that quality going forward. And Lightfall did not at all deliver that. And this article just doesn't particularly... This article cherry picks very specific, positive, good things about the game, and then also makes mistakes, and tries to spin it like everything's amazing and the best thing it's ever been. But it's like, that's not quite the case, and there's we're at probably the lowest point of community morale, and people are out here, with an article like this being like, oh yeah, the players are the problem. It's like, do you not understand? Like, we've been with this game for so long, and we all want it to be so good, so to have the game fall so far from such a high height, it sucks. It really sucks, and this article does not do that justice. Anyway, despite my agreements there, I just generally feel that this article is not well informed, and it misses many key critiques from the players, for the players have of the game. And some of the things it doesn't get correct is that it says, unless I'm misunderstanding, they say, that the dungeon key is only available to Ultimate Edition owners, and they basically said that Bungie have reversed their decision on sunsetting and that they vowed to never sunset anything again. And, that's not really the case. One, you've got the dungeon key comment isn't correct since you can buy the dungeon key separately, and that's part of the escalating monetization that they've done to Destiny that people have got an issue with because it's confusing to get other players into, it's confusing for just new players in general, and if you're into it but you don't have the money to buy everything at once, it's just so many different parts of the game you can buy, kind of thing. And this, of course, article foregoes any mention of that. And in fact, it even they defend the monetization, which I think is true to some extent. Yeah, it makes sense why some of the monetization exists, but we have also heard recently that because of the Microsoft Activision deal, that Microsoft said that they were going to acquire Bungie, but they felt that they were I can't remember what exactly the term was that they used, but they basically said that Bungie burned through cash quite quickly. And so maybe that's why they feel they have to monetize Destiny so much, because they're again, it's like, who knows, and things might have changed now, but might not be it's not really great if that's the case, and that's why they feel like they have to monetize Destiny more. But yeah, it's weird because when they say that Bungie said they wouldn't be sunsetting expansions ever again, they said that in sort of their showcase last year. But then in an interview shortly after that, they basically effectively were saying, yeah, but never say never, And so while they say they have no intention to vault expansion or non-seasonal content, so your campaigns, your destinations, they also mention that they can't technically quite fully commit to that. They're basically saying they don't want to, but they also can't. So it doesn't mean that Bungie haven't vowed to never sunset anything again, really. Like, that's not really what they've said. And what this article then spins it as is it then starts talking about how Bungie have brought back Vault of Glass and Kingsfall, as if to say that not only are Bungie vowing to not take anything away, they're actually bringing things back. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute, that's conflating two different things that are unrelated, So, for example, Kingsfall and Vault of Glass are Destiny 1 raids, and they've been brought back before they even said about this sunsetting thing, or before that they said they wouldn't take away expansion content anymore. They were bringing back Vault of Glass, and they told us right away when they introduced the concept of the Destiny content vault. They basically said that they're gonna use this vault to kind of bring forth like old content and stuff like that, and the content that has been in Destiny 2 that has come back, which is pretty much none, outside of things like the Leviathan. Leviathan came back, but it wasn't the original raid. It was the space, and it was transformed. It was cool from a story perspective, but it wasn't bringing it back. And then it's out of the game because it was seasonal content that you can explore part of it technically because you've got the dungeon, but that's mostly a new space. And I just think, yeah, it's an unfair assessment because, as I said, the Destiny 1 raids, and as I said, pretty much nothing from Destiny 2 has come back fully. You've got returning exotics now and again, but, Mars has come back, but it's a totally different form, to what we had Mars as before. They have repurposed part of Mars's areas, like for one of the battlegrounds, but that's not original Mars in the same form it was, because that's repurposing it for something else. And they've also taken parts of older existing levels and just reskinned them, like they did for Season of Plunder last year. They took a Mars Lost sector and made it all... They made it look different, basically, changed the lighting, and they had it as like this small mission. These pirate hunts, or whatever they call them in Plunder. And it was like, that's not bringing it back. Like, so they're not bringing things back like the way this article spins that, basically. And I just think, painting the picture that Bungie are committed to returning all the game's content is missing the forest for the trees a little bit, to be honest. And then the article goes on, and it says, it goes on to say that Bungie, quote-unquote, clapped back with, this is a spoiler, but by killing off Amanda Holiday last season, explaining how, why, and when, and linking it to Lightfall story. And I'm like, I don't think it explained really all that much, to be honest. I think there's so many things about last season, like, what were the Cabal trying to do? What, like, it was all mixed up with Lightfall's story, which wasn't very good, and that's not that's not really something that's much debated because most people are universally agreeing that it wasn't that great, you know. And it also mentions that like the recent seasonal beats in this season of the Deep, are they're almost saying that they're like almost like a response, or further like clapping back to critiques about the seasonal structure and storylines. And I just, you know, as the article points out as well, that Destiny's story started getting good during season. Well, the article suggests I'm specifically Destiny's story started getting good during season of the Chosen in year 4. That was when things really started to change. But the player base's critiques are more nuanced about seasons and that and stuff. So and the outrage that some people show fails to articulate that properly. Some people are good at expressing criticism. A lot of people are, but then on the flip side, you also got a lot of the people in Twitter replies and things like that just go off and talking nonsense pretty much. And I don't think that really gives anyone a good idea of how, of like the actual criticism of the game. But then this article just further muddies the waters on that topic because it forgoes the explanation, it forgoes any effective explanation as to what those critiques are, in favor of making the point that, like the title literally says, players are the problem, almost like Bungie are perfect with no flaws. I mean, I'm pretty sure the article doesn't even suggest anything critical outside of content being removed. But there's way more things that are problematic with Destiny right now than just content having been removed. And the closing sentence just really drives home a message, almost to suggest that like no critique is allowed or it's unfair. And I can imagine, I'll quote it here, but this is, I imagine, for PvP players, very frustrating to read or hear. They say, quote, "As we draw closer to the final shape release date and the end of the Light and Dark saga, we should know how lucky we've been to see this sprawling epic through. Yet right now, some of us just don't know when to sit back and enjoy it." End quote. And I just think that's such a... I don't really think that's a fair way to... I think there's truth to some of that. I think for sure there are many things that have been great, but for some people, especially PvP players, they have not been treated with the same kind of attention or respect necessarily as the PvE crowd. And even the PvE crowd isn't just loving the game right now because you've got like the story isn't always that great. Well, the story was good and then Lightfall happened. And last year I don't think the seasons were that amazing. I think, as I said before, character development wise, very good. Story wise, not great. Plus it was setting up Lightfall, which didn't amount to anything anyway. So, but then this season, it feels like we're slowly getting back there. So I think we're on a good path for the story at least, but there are still other things that people have problems with the seasonal model. I've said before, but I don't know how you're supposed to fix that really. I actually think seasons are mostly okay, but I'm not going to be like, oh, don't change them. I think more variety is the spice of life. But yeah, there's plenty of nuanced discussion and nuanced critiques across the board for Destiny, and this article just does not really at all articulate any of them. And again, to go as far as saying players are the problem, I think is incredibly unfair, and tone deaf, honestly. And again, so it's nothing against the writer, and because as I said, I do agree that there can be a lot of outrage, and like I said before, I agree on that, and just the fact that there is a lot of good that the game's had. It's not all bad as the community can sometimes paint it as themselves. But I don't think, unless you've been really in the trenches and seen everything firsthand, been deeply involved in the community and kind of followed Destiny and Bungie from early on, I really don't think you can have a strong or particularly well-informed outlook on the game or where it's been. I'm not saying you can't have an opinion or a positive opinion on the game, because there is a lot to praise, most definitely, but I don't know how you can follow the game for its whole life and say that its players are the definitive problem, But of course, I imagine that headline was probably good for clicks, whether or not that was the... I mean, I feel like that was. That's why you do any headline. I title things like that as well. I try not to title things like that. I don't necessarily like accusing players all over as like... Well, I try not to. It's one of those where it's like, especially for a community... Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, if this person... I don't know, but if, I don't know how long they've been with Destiny, but these critiques do read as someone who is fairly new to the game. And that's fine. Like, that's not like a problem. Like, it's not bad. I actually envy people that are new to the game because other than its confusion, I'm like, man, you have so much to play and grind for and things like that. And whilst I think there's certain aspects of that that are a bit unfortunate, like the Monument to Lost Lights archive that you can get old exotic weapons from is a little bit too grindy, I think now. I think that probably needs to be changed. But I just think that stuff like that is so cool because it means you have so much to experience, you have so much to play for. And for me, obviously, who's been playing a lot, obviously I've played a lot, so I've done a lot of that stuff. Which it's fine. Like it's not like I'm here sat being like, oh man, there's not enough content. That's one thing that I usually find is that I don't feel like I'm ever complaining. I've really had a problem with the amount of content we've gotten. It's more. I've always said it like the depth. It's always the depth that is the thing that I think is not as good as it could be. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent now. As I said, nothing against the writer. And it's not that it's fine for them to have opinions. And I know I said I don't tend to like accusing players of saying things. I'm sure in the past I have said like, oh, people are reacting like this. I talk generally like I comment on like how people are, but I also don't tend to like if I see an outrage from a community, I don't tend to really. Well, I don't see much. Honestly, I don't see much outrage from other communities outside of Call of Duty community, which I don't play Call of Duty enough to warrant a proper opinion on that. But I have. But I at least have played enough of them and kind of have an idea where things are at. I still follow them in the news, and so I try not to kind of say, "Oh, it's the players that are the problem," because I just think, well, no. I mean, people that are invested in these games are invested because they love it. So yes, they might seem, like assholes because they're just criticizing the game, complaining all the time, and probably it's not a good look always like complaining all the time, but it's probably because they like the game a lot and they want it to be better than it is, and that's certainly the case for me. And I love Destiny, and as it sounds like this writer does, and that's fine. Like there is, I do subscribe to the idea that there is a lot of greatness in Destiny, and for people that really enjoy it, it's a really good game. And there are probably some people that just don't have the interest or like the they don't have the energy to complain or criticize things because they just enjoy the game for what it is, and that is totally fine. But I also think it's unfair to go out and point fingers at people as well and be like, "Ah, man, you're the problem." But hey, it's an opinion, and people are free to express that. As I said, with everything else, I've left a link to this article in the description. And again, I'm not trying to attack the writer, and as I said, differing opinions are fine. But to me, I always find it frustrating when an article or a video or whatever it is misunderstands critiques, because as I said, it muddies the waters, and it means there's no longer proper discussion because people are reading something misinformed, basically, which in itself can then cause further disarray because everyone's fighting on different grounds, basically. And this has happened throughout Destiny's life cycle. I've had many opinions on what the people have said, so I am certainly not unique to this to this particular article. So I'm coughing again. Anyway, let's leave that there. That's enough of that. You can check that link out in the description. And yeah, as I said, lots of cool things to look forward to anyway. And I'm still invested in the game, still looking forward to things. So just before I wrap up here, I just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of other videos that I've seen, and just kind of talk about some thoughts on them. And these are just recommended videos that I've got here in articles. And so the first is a video by a YouTube creator called True Vanguard, who basically had a video talking about the top 4 things Destiny PvP needs to sort of fix it or whatever. He actually also has a video that talks about in response to another streamer called Glad, where he's basically talking about like why he plays PvP and what the and kind of goes into the history of what the expectations have been and where they're at now. And so yeah, this video is just a good video, talks about what PvP can do to improve. I think it's a really good insight from someone who was obviously invested in that particular part of the game. Some of the things I've spoken about before and I agree with, but True Vanguard is obviously a lot more invested in PvP than I am, and I followed him quite well. He's a good guy. I think he's also on Destiny Community Podcast now as well. He's been on there quite a bit, which is a good podcast, and you should listen to it. So yeah, I've left that link in. Why can I not talk? It's just simple. I always struggle saying I've left a link to that in the description. It's like whatever. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I've been recording for a while. This is actually a lot longer than I had anticipated. I think, this is probably like an hour and a half-ish now, I think. Oh, maybe it's even close to 2 hours at this point, who knows. I think it will be nearly 2 hours by the end. So yeah, it's a good video. I've left a link in the description to that. You should go and check it out. And kind of bouncing off that, another YouTuber who covers a lot of Destiny lore, Mylin Games, has a video where he's discussing about those people that just say to just quit a game, if you're not enjoying it. Very, very much ties into actually that article that I was talking about. And I thought it was a good discussion because he sort of goes through the different aspects of it. It's quite a chill video, not too not accusational or anything like that. And he just generally sums it up by saying, yeah, it's people stick around because they like a game kind of thing. And I personally, I think, yeah, it's I think taking a break from a game if you're not enjoying it, whatever, like in a situation like now, is good. But I also get why people stick around, like on socials or come back at each season and event and things like that. It's a pretty nuanced discussion, honestly, and I think I understand why people say, "But why do you play it?" And again, I guess I understand why someone would say, "Oh, it's the players that's the problem." It's the mindset you're in, but it comes from a deep attachment to the thing you're enjoying. I don't know if I'd call it an addiction. You could liken it to that, I guess, to some extent, but I don't think it's not that bad. Though maybe it's for some. Who knows? And yeah, and then finally, a journalist at Forbes called Paul Tassi wrote an article where he basically discusses Destiny's insane amount of in-game purchases, both across MTX and content, such as dungeons, seasons, and expansions. And it's just a decent article, just kind of outline that. And I will say, I mean, I always vouch for people talking about the MTX in games, because I think sometimes that does run a little bit wild with what's off or not, what's on offer. And many games have gone way too far with it. I understand it needs to make money, but to me, Destiny is like, I think of any game, Destiny monetizes more than anything of any game I know. I'm not too sure about other MMOs like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 14 maybe monetize a lot, but I don't really know. Every game's different. Every game has a different budget though, so like we can't just be like, oh, it monetizes the most. It's like I imagine Destiny being quite an expensive game to make at at the quality that it is. So which is also why I think, again, back to that thing of like maybe we aren't appreciative enough of what we actually get, you know. Um, but it does. There are certain things that are monetized. I'm just like, do you really need to monetize this? Like these $10 shaders that would kind of get all the shader bundles, and then you got transmog, which I really hope transmog. I think transmog has got to be one of the first things that once you've got to change. That is like almost like an industry standard that they are failing to meet. So I feel like that's easiest. Anyway, I've left links to all three of those two videos from True Vanguard and Myland Games, and that article from Paul Tassi in the description. Recommend to checking them out. And they kind of echo from my thoughts, but they're also just got good conversations as well. But anyway, that'll be it for this episode. I think I've actually recorded this in 3 parts. I think one part was about 37 minutes, another part was about 40 minutes. So you're looking at an hour and 20 with this, you're looking at an hour and 40, so we're hurtling towards 2 hour mark. We are nearly a 2 hour episode, which is the second episode and already nearly at 2 hours now. I think this might be longer than is the case. I think in 2 weeks, I don't see much happening. We'll be about the end of Solstice then. I'll obviously probably be talking about the latest Veil Containment law. Hopefully that stays good. It seems like it is so far, which is really cool. But yeah, I'll be discussing that and any other recent happenings in the Destiny landscape. I'm hoping, my aim is to have a bonus episode for this podcast later this week, discussing my thoughts on Solstice after I've played it a bit. That'll give me, I'm hoping that'll be out for Friday, so if I'm planning it on like the Thursday, I'll get to play a little bit. Though I will say I think I'm still going to be on and off Destiny, just in general, because until I finish Final Fantasy 16, that's my current goal, and I'm loving that game. It's so good. And yeah, I'm also trying to think a bit further ahead about how I'm going to cover this Destiny showcase. I sort of alluded to earlier, but, Armored Core 6 comes out around then, so I don't know if I will be playing that, but there's that to cover. And also just that you got Season 22 launch, and then you got the Destiny Showcase launch, or like reveal the same day, which will be on the Tuesday. And I think the first Destiny episode will be on the, I think, was it the Monday afterwards or something? But anyway, I'll figure it all out. But I'm sort of trying to think ahead and plan out how I'm going to cover that, because I might have to move the schedule around a little bit. It might be that I have like a bonus episode where I'll talk about the season launch potentially, or I'll talk about the expansion in that, and then I'll save everything else. I think what would be better actually is to talk about the season the week after and talk about the final showcase and get that out probably as soon as possible. Maybe on the Wednesday, but it's getting close. That time's gonna be busy as hell. Honestly, I might have to move things around a little bit, but yeah, that's it for now. I appreciate you listening. If you've listened all this way, very much appreciate that. It's been an extremely long episode, a lot to get through, yeah, really. But yeah, let me know any questions you have, any thoughts, feedback, whatever it is. Be sure to throw it in the description, and I'll see you next time. As I said, remember I've got the first episode of this podcast as well as the bonus episode that were out. If you want to go and check those out, there's also my What I'm Playing podcast, which went out last Monday, I think. And I'll should be back here again next Monday again to talk about that. And sort of I've got to figure out what we're going to talk about for that. Primarily just Final Fantasy 16 because that's all I've been playing at the moment, and so it's going to be a mix of that. And as I said, that podcast is primarily to talk about games in general, the industry, and everything. So there probably won't really be any Destiny talk on that unless it's like relevant, like the expansion or like new season. Like, oh, I'm playing that, and maybe I'll use that as a place to talk about that there. But that's as far as it'll go, since I'll save like the bulk of my thoughts for this show, which will be every other week. So for now, I will leave you, and thanks for listening if you have, and I will see you next time, which I think, hopefully, if all goes to plan, will be the 31st of July. That's my plan. So back to the Monday again, but if hopefully it won't get delayed, I have to plan ahead a little bit more this time. But anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Ciao, ciao, ciao.